Thank you, Chair Brown, and welcome, Dr. Chopra. It's great to have you with us today. I'd like to use my time to talk with you about the proliferation of businesses and scams that are targeting homeowners. So we know that homeownership is a primary driver of wealth in our country, and that home equity represented about more than a quarter of household wealth in 2020, and that following the surge in home prices during the pandemic, homeowners have added like $8 trillion in wealth. But unfortunately, this seems like it's giving rise to some what look to us like some pretty dodgy businesses and just outright scams. So when you were here last, I think that you and I have discussed sort of the issue of exclusive real estate listing agreements and what that looks like. And now we're seeing this uptick in so-called zombie mortgages that are catching homeowners by surprise. Some second mortgage that they thought wasn't there anymore, and it is there, and now they're in a bind. And last month, ProPublica reported about a real estate flipping company that is targeting vulnerable homeowners and using deception, coercion to close sales, and these complex legal maneuvers nobody really understands how they work, that is hurting victims and keeping them from getting out of these unfair contracts. So, Director Chopra, this is what I want to have you talk about. When you were here in December, you noted that while the CFPB can't predict everything, the agency does have a role to play in preventing such issues from going nationwide. So I'm wondering, have you seen an uptick in these deceptive and exploitive products? What are you seeing, and what do you think? What are you doing to monitor and stay on top of this?
So, Senator Smith, I appreciate that, because there's actually something new that we're hearing too. Mm-hmm. I actually met with some Minnesota community leaders about contract for deed, targeting certain immigrant groups across the country. Yes. And I think what we want to make sure is, even where we might not have jurisdiction to go after a scam, we want to tell the Justice Department, tell the state AG, and we do, and tell others as well. I worry that because of the housing shortage, right, and housing affordability issues, a lot of people are looking at older homeowners who are sitting on a lot of equity. Many of them may be widowed, right, or limited English proficiency, and targeting them. And you mentioned that ProPublica article that obviously had some very troubling allegations. I don't want to comment on that in too much detail, but we obviously work by looking at the data, our complaints, but also by talking to people on the ground. One of the big mistakes in the lead up to the financial crisis is federal regulators ignored stories from the ground. Exactly. And that proved to be a pivotal mistake.
I completely agree with that, because it was happening to them in real time, and they could explain they could explain the trend in real time, because it was their life and their home.
And they have the documents often that are the canary in the coal mine to show who is funding this and who is orchestrating these schemes. And that gives us clues about where we need to target.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think this is so concerning, how these companies appear to be taking advantage of folks who are, as you said, older Minnesotans and Americans who don't understand what they're getting into, and they're being taken advantage of. Related to this, you know well that Minnesota has a very large entrepreneurial and really important Somali community. And we are seeing in Minnesota that this community has been targeted by these predatory land contracts. So we've heard concerns from advocates and from consumers about what this means. And so this is the specific thing I want to ask you about. We've heard some concerns from advocates and consumers that the CFPB complaint form is geared primarily for mortgages rather than land contracts or similar agreements. And so what happens is folks they can't figure out how to use it. It's difficult to report on. And so some people who have been victims are just sort of dissuaded from participating. So would you be willing to work with our office on this so that we could find an alternate way to get some of this report?
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that they can even file with the Consumer Sentinel. So the AGs, we will work on that. We've actually tested with various groups of people of different backgrounds about how they use the complaint system. We can brief you on that.
Great.
And some state legislators in St. Paul also shared some of these issues with me. And we've been looking at it further.
Well, we'll follow up on that and
Please.
work closely with those legislators. So appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there